Well, a plan to transfer two Australians from a Bali prison in preparation for their execution has been postponed on the request of the Indonesian Attorney General. Muhammad Prasetyo has told the ABC the decision was made so that convicted drug smugglers Andrew Chan and Myran Sukumaran could spend more time with their families. Professor Tim Lindsay is the Director of the Centre for Indonesian Law, Islam and Society at the University of Melbourne. Tim, thanks for joining us again. Anything that slows down the process would be seen as a positive. What is your reading of what this postponement might mean, and also the announcement that the Attorney General is going to be holding a press conference at some stage soon?
Well, it's very hard to call what's going to be said at this press conference, but on death row, any delay means hope. So this is a positive sign. The lawyers for Sukumaran and Chan have got two legal proceedings going at present. One is an application to the Administrative Court asking it to force the President to review his clemency decision on the grounds that he reportedly just didn't read the papers at all, although he's required by law to do so. The other is a report to the Judicial Commission asking for an investigation of judges who are allegedly corrupt, seeking bribes to avoid handing down the death penalty in the first case. Now, they're both very serious matters, and clearly where lives are at stake, they need to be properly examined and decided, not in a rush. The political situation in Indonesia, in a broad sense, is very intense. The corruption scandals are putting a great deal of pressure on the President. So both the judicial processes, the Judicial Commission investigation need to be decided, and they need to be decided without political pressure on them as there currently is. So a delay offers some hope for that. If it's just a delay for a couple of days and they get moved to that prison island, then it's likely they'll be dead within 4 days after that move. But if it means more than that, then that's a very important new development.
Now, Tim, obviously we don't want to be giving people false hope, but is it possible that the Indonesians could be considering reconsidering these executions?
Look, it is possible. The President has for some time been asserting a very tough line, no mercy for drug offenders, he said repeatedly, and he said it's a blanket position. But the cracks have begun to show in the government in recent days. Last week, the Minister for Law and Human Rights came out and said that the government should reconsider that position. He backed down the next day, but we've had the head of the Human Rights Commission calling on the government to stop the executions. And we've had the very prominent former Chief Justice of the Constitutional Court, Jimli Ashadiki, really campaigning, I think, against the death penalty and calling on the government to stop and reconsider. So there are internal voices as well, and that adds to external pressure from Australia, from the UK, from EU, from the UN Secretary-General, Ban Ki-moon, all of whom are calling on Indonesia to stop executions. And of course, we've had Brazil and Netherlands withdraw their ambassadors. So I think it's a whole range of factors, but it does look like it may be bringing significant pressure on the government to reconsider. But
Tim,
too soon to say.
Can Indonesians, though, spare the lives of two Australians and not spare the lives of all those other people on death row? I think there's around 50 people who are slated to be executed this year alone.
Yeah, yes, the Attorney General, Prasetyo, has said that, or the reports that his department has indicated that they want to execute all those people by the end of the year. And that sort of mass killing would be, I think, very damaging to Indonesia's reputation internationally. More particularly, it would make it extremely difficult for Indonesia to succeed in its long-term efforts to get its own nationals off death row overseas, including some drug offenders. And that's another factor. This double standard is also becoming very difficult to justify even among Indonesia's elite.
Tim, if the executions were cancelled and the best case scenario happened, what would the political fallout be for the Indonesian government, and would the President lose face?
I'm not sure that we're looking at executions being cancelled. I think we're looking at delays so that the legal issues can be worked through. But yeah, I think there is a lot of political pressure on President Jokowi, or Joko Widodo, Jokowi as he's known, to maintain his stand. But on the other hand, the damage that could be potentially done to Indonesia's international reputation, the pressure that's being brought to bear, and more importantly, the obvious difficulty this creates for their own strong internal policy of assisting their own nationals overseas, is a pretty strong counterweight against that. I don't think we would see them immediately walking away. If they were going to reconsider, it would be a slow process from delay onwards.
Tim, Jokowi lacks a majority in the legislature there. How does that play into all of these events?
Jokowi is, at present, a weak president in a very difficult situation. He, as you say, he is a minority government in the legislature. We know the problems associated with that pretty well in this country. More difficult even for him because the majority is controlled by the man he defeated in the election last year. And it's proving very difficult for him to get his agenda through. If he loses popular support, he has very little in the elite. He's an outsider president. He looks past the elite to the public, relying on civil society. So matching the tough guy image of his opponent, former General Prabowo Subianto, is important to maintaining his political cred to keep this government together.
But then Team SBY put a halt to a number of executions for years. Did it harm him politically at all?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Indonesia was on a track, it was clearly a reductionist country on a track towards abolition even, with an average number of executions per year from 1989 to about 2013 of only 2, and SBY personally put in place an unofficial moratorium from 2008 to 2013, only resuming executions in a small number in 2013. So this is a really major departure from that standard under Yudhoyono to wanting to kill almost 60 people in the first year in office with statements of no mercy for drug offenders. So look, the previous policy worked because Yudhoyono was able to counterbalance it with getting Indonesian nationals off death row overseas. That combination, which worked well for Yudhoyono, Jokowi's not able to maintain if he starts killing drug offenders in Indonesia en masse.
Pete?
To what extent does any demonstration of anger or emotion in Australia have any bearing on what decisions are going to be made over in Indonesia, Tim?
Well, it is certainly true that political history shows that confronting Indonesia usually results in the exact opposite outcome of that intended. But I don't think Australia has confronted Indonesia. I think Australian policy on this has so far been measured. It's entirely appropriate for a government to intervene to seek to rescue its nationals on death row. After all, that's what Indonesia has been doing with its well-resourced task force since 2011. On some reports, it's got 60 people off death row. So Australia seeking the same sort of outcome, I don't think is offensive for Indonesia. I think so far Indonesia has said on a number of occasions that they appreciate why Australia is doing this.
Tim Wilson?
Tim, you said that Jokowi relies very much on civil society support for his political legitimacy. What is the public sentiment and the public attitude in Indonesia to the death penalty and the application in the case of drugs? If he gives clemency and mercy, will it be a popular or an unpopular act?
Well, I think that the majority of people in Indonesia would likely support the death penalty, although that's pure speculation. We don't have any polls or evidence for that. But on the other hand, within the elite, there is increasing discomfort with it. There is a sense among civil society in particular, that is, the NGOs, the academic community, that sort of intelligentsia, if you like, that executing people is no longer in keeping with Indonesia's post-Suharto liberal democratic mode and its official embrace of human rights. And that's seen by former judges coming out, but also activist NGOs who've been campaigning against death penalty for some time. So I'd say civil society, which is a key conduit of opinion from the masses, if you like, is somewhat divided on this, but the balance in civil society would be against the death penalty. Whether that's the popular view or not, we can't say, but civil society has a great deal of influence on how popular views are expressed politically.